it's Chantel with Wildberry Quilting, and today we are doing part 2 of sewing the Ashton dress together, which is that really cute little purple dress with, you'll see. Let's get started. Okay, so I have gathered my skirt and I have clipped it into my waistband, and as you can see, it is a hot clipped tangled mess. Not really tangled, just tons and tons of clipping. And partly that's because I want to keep the gather straight as I'm going, and partly that's because I did not gather it quite enough, because I did not measure my fabric before I started gathering to figure out what the amount was that I needed to, how I needed to adjust the dials to do it exactly right. And I also forgot that I had increased the length or the width of the skirt panels, just because I like the skirts to be nice and full and foofy. I mean, what little girl does not like to have a nice foofy twirly dress? I know my daughter does, so that is what this will be. I'm going to take this back over to the serger and give it a nice clean edge and serge off this extra ugly serging right here that I'd used to gather it, because I'd gone over that twice, which is why it's kind of ratty looking. All right, so we're back and I have everything serged. Now we're just going to be doing the hemming. Now you could certainly press this into place and measure it with a little hem gauge and everything else, but that's not how I sew. I just go for it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fold it down the amount that I want and fold it over again, and then just get to work. Just make sure that you have the correct color thread in your sewing machine, because you don't want to be sewing this with white thread on a purple dress. That would be a lot to rip out. And it would be very noticeable if you were off at all. Now, traditionally, a little dress like this would have a longer hemline, and that would be so that you could let it out if you need to, so that it would have more wear, and that is definitely a good thing to do. Also, you would do a blind hem in that case. That way you would not end up with all the little pokey holes that your needle is going to create if you were to go back and rip out all these stitches. Plus, not to mention, who wants to rip out stitches in the entire hem if it is tightly stitched? You would definitely want to do that with, oops, got a stray thread pulling things up there. You would definitely want to do that with a blind hem instead. But we're just doing a short little hem, which is what the pattern called for and what I cut the fabric for. I would have had to cut the fabric much longer if I was planning to do a blind hem. it is coming along. It is looking very cute. And I can't wait till I get it done so I can show you the final reveal. I hope you stick around for that, because it's not long now. All right, sleeves. And again, you just want to make sure that the way that you are tacking down this seam allowance is the same direction that you have attached it to your skirt. So in this case, I need it to go to this side. And I'm going to fold it once, and then I am going to fold it again, but when I do, I'm bringing it up some to make sure that I have enough room to put the elastic in. So probably about like that is where I want it. I'm going to go around with the clips on this portion, because if you don't, there is a chance that you'll end up with a bubble of fabric at the end, and then you're going to be ripping stitches. So I start on one side and then I go to the other side and fold it down about the same and clip it in place. And it really is just going through and doing it in the middles. It's the easiest way to get it even. Yep, that looks like it's going to lay just fine. So I don't think I'm going to have to do any adjusting once I get that other side into place. So I'm going to sew around the edge here, and then I'll do the other sleeve. But first, let's do this one. So I need to leave an opening for me to insert the elastic though. So I am not going to start right here where I have my seam, because if I start here, then I have to get the elastic past this piece, which can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. So I'm going to start just past it, right about here. Okay, so I've got my elastic casing here, and I've left just this little, probably about a 2-inch gap for me to be able to insert my elastic. All right, so I've got my elastic cut to size, and I've got my bodkins. I'm just going to pinch in the sides like this. And I'm actually going to attach a bodkin to both sides of my elastic, both ends. I find this to be the easiest way to not lose one end of my elastic inside. Oh, I'm going to snip this thread real quick, these threads right here, so they don't end up turning into a thread nest underneath when I stitch that closed. All right, so you're just going to insert the bodkin, not bobbin. I don't think you'd have much luck trying to thread elastic with a bobbin. Well, I mean, unless you were threading it with elastic thread, in which case we'd be talking about threading it a completely different way. But we'll just ignore that. Okay, so we just want to make sure that our elastic is all laying flat in here. That's all turned the same direction, because otherwise we'll end up with a wobble. We don't want that. So looks like they're both supposed to be this way. I'm just going to remove my bodkins, and I'm going to pull this up tight so I can get to the elastic. I'm just going to sew a line of stitches right here to hold them together. And I like to sew a few stitches, a few times over it, just to make sure it's really going to stay. I think that's pretty good. Doesn't matter how pretty that looks because it's going to be hidden inside. And now we're just going to sew that up. Do a little back stitch at the very beginning, make sure that we don't have anything coming undone later. And then a little back stitch where it meets our thread on the other side. We can adjust our gathers and see how it looks. Now, I left my elastic kind of long in the thread, in the sleeve, because my daughter has a problem with it getting too tight on her arms sometimes. So I want to make sure that it's not going to be too tight on her. We want to make sure it's comfortable. And I'm going to do the other side, and then we will do the buttons and the buttonholes together. Okay, so I dug through all of my buttons trying to figure out what I wanted to use. I knew I wanted something that was like shell or some kind of pearly kind of white buttons. Ideally, I would have loved to use these little old antique buttons, but sadly, I only have two, and I really think I would need a third one with how small they are. I've got these ones, and I do kind of have three of those. These two are a little bit darker than this one, which, you know, if I put it up at the top, it would be like almost like an accent one or hidden by her hair, so it really wouldn't matter. But they're plastic, and I'm not fond of that. So I dug a little bit further, and I came across these. And I think these are the ones that I'm going to go with. They are shell buttons, and they're from her great-grandmother, her sewing collection. I actually do have enough that I could put 3 on there, but I feel like they're big enough that that might kind of crowd it and be too much. So instead, I'm going to go with 2, and I'm going to space them about like that. So I just got to mark those with my fabric pen, whatever that is, our soluble work. So basically, I want to make sure that it's not hanging over the edge or that it's too far back. I think right about here looks good to me. So I'm going to mark it right there. And I want it to be the same length and probably about, or the same width into the fabric, probably about there. So yeah, that looks about right to me. And I did it real quick like this just by eyeballing it because it's only 2 buttons. If I was going to be doing any more than that, I would definitely measure it out and do a better job of that. But the way things are, I think this will turn out just fine. So I have my machine set to make the buttonhole for this size of button. And I just need to line it up with that dot. Make sure my fabric is straight. And I can start stitching. Since I have this bubble here that's going to cause me some problems, or the seam, rather, I should say, it's going to cause me some problems. I want these to be the same length. So I'm just going to mark it like this. Line up the dot on the one, the dot on the other one, and then mark a new spot to start at. Alright, so got that in place, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it now. And there we go. Those came out pretty nice. So, okay, so I've got my buttonholes sewn on. Now I need to cut them open. I'm going to use this underneath it, and this is a little buttonhole cutter. You can just line it up and rock it back and forth, and it will cut right through. Just make sure you don't cut your stitches, because then that kind of defeats the purpose. And gives you a nice cut open buttonhole without risking a catastrophe. So many times people will use their seam rippers to cut open their buttonholes. And when you do that, it's very easy to accidentally go all the way up and cut through your fabric and just completely ruin your project. And I've also seen where people will, before I had one of those, I had a pin. I would use a pin right at the end. Let me show you what that looks like for those who maybe aren't familiar. You would take a pin and just poke it through like this. And the idea is that when you would cut it with your seam ripper could not go past the pin. But I have seen where people have used this technique and still ended up somehow managing to cut their fabric as well. So this little buttonhole cutter really is the simplest and safest way to cut open a buttonhole without having something major happen. And if you have just spent ungodly amounts of time sewing together something like a men's dress shirt, the last thing you want to do is to cut open 20 buttonholes with a seam ripper and destroy your project on the last one. It happens. It does. All right, so I find the easiest way to mark this is to just go ahead and use a couple of clips to pin the front and back together the way that I want it to lay. And then I'm going to just lay it down. Clear the frog out of my throat. And I'm going to mark. Now you want, when you are marking a buttonhole like this, you actually want it to go to sit just above the middle point. So rather than going right into the middle, I'm going to go in just a little bit above that, separate that open buttonhole, and just make a mark in there to the fabric underneath. I'm going to do the same thing right there. And just check. Yep, they both showed up. Now that's where I'm going to be attaching my buttons. All right, guys, here is our final reveal. It just came out so cute. I love it. And I've already shown it to my daughter and she loves it too. Kind of give you a closer shot of that bodice and how it came out. I did end up catching a little bit more on the one side of with the doily. It seems like more of it got caught into the seam on this side. Usually when I use the lace doilies, I will make sure that it's larger than the bodice piece. But since she's only 3, she needs a fairly small size, and this was the smallest doily I had. So I made it work, and it just kind of shows a little bit more on this side than what it does on this side, sadly. But I don't think it'll be too noticeable. As they say, if you can't see it on a galloping horse, then it should be fine, right? And then we've got our little mother of pearl buttons on the back. And I am very pleased. She's going to get lots of wear out of it. And I think that the little bit longer sleeves will help. It's kind of 3/4 length sleeves. That'll help transition this piece into fall. So thanks for joining me on this sew along. I can't wait to sew with you again. Oh, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you again next time. Bye.